All right, in our last segment, we stopped after step 3, and now we're picking up with step 4 of the consumer cognitive decision-making process model. So here we have step 4, product choice. This tends to occur when either the cluster frontier is found, that's a really easy decision, right? Or when the cluster frontier is determined non-existent. But it does tend to happen at this point. In other words, it's a more difficult decision when the cluster frontier is determined to be non-existent, but usually at this point in the process, if you've gone this far, you are sold on buying one. Hey, it's just a matter of which one. And that is because of something called sunk cost effects. And here's your next researcher name, Kahneman. So, very famous cognitive psychologist Daniel Kahneman has shown repeatedly that the more resources that we sink into something, by resources I mean money, time, effort, okay? The more resources we sink into something, the more committed we tend to become. So even if you don't find the cluster frontier at this point, you're usually going to buy one of what the ones you're seriously considering to date. So in my example of my water heater, if I cannot find that cluster frontier, I'm probably going to decide between one of those two that I found before that. So I'm either going to be sacrificing the number of gallons or the number of dollars, right, to run it. Hey, but I'm still most likely going to make a product choice. Step 4 of the model. Now, step 5 is the post-purchase evaluation. Okay, from a marketing perspective, the most important thing to remember about the post-purchase evaluation process is that it is ongoing long after the purchase is made, and it can have long-term effects. People are evaluating the product the entire time they are owning it and using it. And even the disposal of the product can influence their decisions to buy another. What if, let's say, they buy an elliptical machine, and then when they go to dispose of it years down the road, they find out they can't get anyone to take it for free, and they actually have to pay to have it removed because it is so heavy. Or let's say they bought a product that they find is non-recyclable, and they really care about the environment. So even the disposal can influence this. Marketers go to a lot of trouble and expense to position products in our minds. When we say product positioning, this refers to the ranking of the product compared to other competing brands. So right now, for instance, an iPad is positioned much higher than a Fire tablet in the market, and this is reflected in their prices, right? So consumer psychology persists long after a purchase. This decision-making process doesn't conclude until the product is disposed of. That whole time that people use it and they own it, they're still evaluating it, even in the process of disposing of it. Okay? Now, we tend to learn more about a product's quality when we own it, and thus we can reposition it in our minds. Quite often this happens. So maybe you placed Hewlett-Packard as lower than Sony for TVs in your mind, but after a great experience of actually owning a Hewlett-Packard TV, you moved it up, comparable to Sony's position in the market, in the same position. Okay, so post-purchase evaluations can reposition that product. So this decision-making process persists long after a purchase. We are motivated to evaluate our purchases after making them in order to inform better future decisions. And there's two possible ultimate outcomes of step 5, right? There are different degrees of each, but still two possible ultimate outcomes: a satisfied customer or a dissatisfied customer. Let's look at two different types of satisfied customers. We'll deal with dissatisfaction later. Okay, so two main types of satisfied consumers: those who have low involvement and those who have high involvement, that are highly involved. Okay. Let's consider an example of shampoo for low involvement. So for most people, not all, but many, they're not very involved in their shampoo decisions. So even with low involvement, satisfaction can result in brand laziness, which is good for marketers, right? As long as it lasts. So it's good, but it's not great. And you hopefully remember from earlier in this lecture, brand laziness can be particularly vulnerable to discounts and promotions of other brands. But highly involved, satisfied customers could result in a marketer's dream called brand loyalty. Very resistant to change, right? So obviously, the more marketers can get consumers to care about their products and the more satisfied that consumers are with the products, the better chance at brand loyalty. So what determines satisfaction? We're actually going to explore that in our next segment.